Well, thanks for streaming with us. Today, the Congressional Budget Office said there is, quote, a significant risk that the U.S. could default on its debt at some point in the first 2 weeks of June. Lawmakers are up against the clock now to reach a deal on the debt ceiling or risk an unprecedented default. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins us now from Capitol Hill. Jay, where do things stand on these all-important negotiations?
Well, Kevin McCarthy, don't forget, met with President Biden and other congressional leaders in the White House this week. And he said before that meeting he believes there needs to be some kind of an agreement on the debt ceiling by next week in order to make sure it gets through the Congress, because there's a congressional calendar. The president has plans. The president is going to Japan next week. There is limited time to get this done. And as you said, that CBO report indicating the clock is ticking, that there is a chance of default within those first 2 weeks of June, Terry. I spoke with the number 3 Republican in the House, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, and I asked him, is there enough time, even if there is a debt ceiling deal, to get this done? Here is what he told me. If there is a debt ceiling plan, is there enough time in the legislative calendar to get that through Congress right now?
There's always going to be time.
You don't think there needs to be some kind of temporary extension?
A temporary extension is actually a misnomer. That is an extension. Republicans in the House have already provided the solution, because we took the position from day one. We do not believe this country should ever default. So the solution was delivered. If they have something to talk with our speaker that makes sense, I'm sure that we'll hear back, and there's always time.
Is there a plan for if those talks aren't productive?
Pass the bill. We passed the bill. Oh, my goodness. First thing you got to do is get this thing under control. We're spending $1.29 for every dollar we're bringing in right now. Every important fiscal reform that has taken place in this country in the last 30 years has been done through debt ceiling negotiations.
So a little bit to unpack there, Terry. The first being Republicans did raise the debt ceiling without issue multiple times during the Trump administration. So there's one data point there. Another thing is you hear Emmer saying pass the bill. What he's referring to is that debt ceiling bill that House Republicans narrowly passed that raises the debt ceiling but also levels big spending cuts. A lot of those cuts, obviously something the White House is pushing back strongly against. And the White House isn't moving out of their corner here, saying that they do not believe the debt ceiling is something that is worth negotiating over. They say it's too important to be tied to spending cuts. And the House Republican position, as you heard Emmer articulate, is that they say they've already raised the debt ceiling with those cuts, and that is the negotiating point that they are going to operate from here going forward, Terry.
Got it. You did raise the point that several times during the presidency of Donald Trump, Republicans were just happy to raise the debt ceiling, and the debt went up under Trump, I believe $7 trillion. It's more than twice of what it's gone up under Biden, but those are bygones, I guess. We should let them go. So, Jay, Tuesday's high-stakes meeting that you mentioned between President Biden and congressional leaders ended without a deal. Are they going to meet again? How does it feel? Does it feel like we're getting towards something that could avert this catastrophe?
Well, they were supposed to meet today, Terry, as you know, and then that meeting got pushed back. Whether or not that's a positive or negative sign depends on who you ask. Speaker McCarthy said he believes there's going to be a meeting next week. He said that last night, but he also says he doesn't believe there has been substantive progress, and it doesn't warrant the principals, the big congressional leaders and the president getting back in a room. So he's not telegraphing much optimism right now. But a source close to these talks tells our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, that the fact that this hearing has been postponed is a positive sign, because it shows that the staff who have been working behind the scenes are getting somewhere. They're getting this to a point where they can bring it to their bosses. But we will see next week if there is that meeting that Speaker McCarthy promises may happen, and also if there has been enough headway to get us even further to the goal line here.
Yeah, you know, Jay, that sounds like there's negotiations going on. I thought that the White House position, the president's position, we aren't going to negotiate on this. You know, holding a gun to the world economy and the American economy is no way to negotiate the budget. Sounds like they are, though.
Well, that's the question that I think a lot of people are wondering, myself included, is what are the conversations like behind those closed doors with the congressional staff, with the House Republican staff, with the House Democrat staff, the Senate and the Senate staffers as well, and the White House staffers? What's on the table? Because a lot of the cuts, as you know, that were made in that Republican bill that raises the debt ceiling and also levels those significant spending cuts, a lot of those are non-starters for the White House. Chief among them is rolling back the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. The White House has said that is not something that they are going to entertain. And to your point, the president has long said that the debt ceiling is not something that is worth negotiating over because it's too important, because it should be raised on its own, because the full faith and credit of the United States hinges upon the raising of the debt ceiling in many ways. Nonetheless, these conversations are still going on. So what is on the table? What are they talking about? That is unclear, and we're hoping to get a better sense of that next week if there is another meeting of those principles. And again, we are on the clock here, not just because of how limiting the congressional calendar is. There are no lawmakers, practically no lawmakers in this building today. They often take off Fridays, and they have some time off in July. The president goes to Japan for the G7 meeting next week. So we are very much on the clock here, Terry.
That's right. And as you point out, he's going to be gone for a week or more in Japan and Australia. I'm going with him, but there is this rumbling that maybe he doesn't go. What about Republicans? Are they softening their stance? Do you see any movement on that side?
Well, the Republican point has been, look at our bill. What we want is in our bill. But to what we said about the White House, the idea that there are conversations going on with staff behind closed doors, we've seen that as a potential sign that there might be some concessions that House Republicans are willing to make. Remember, Senate Republicans have said this is something that they are not going to touch until there is a deal. The deal is to be between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy. That's the position of Senate Republicans like Mitch McConnell. So what House Republicans want is very key here. Are they willing to make some concessions and not cut some of the things that they wanted to cut? But also worth pointing out here, Terry, if there are not some sizable spending cuts in a potential deal, that means that it might not get some of the support of the further right Republicans in the House Republican Conference, the kind that Kevin McCarthy has had to court on big votes over the last few months. And then what does that mean? Does he have to turn to Democrats potentially to pass something if there is a deal that some further right House Republicans don't like? A lot still uncertain in all of these talks.
Absolutely, and it's worth mentioning that the United States is one of the only countries in the world that has such a thing as a debt ceiling. It's a kind of a quirk of our system, and I think it's fair to say no way to run a popsicle stand. Jay O'Brien, thanks very much for that. Always learn something from you there.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.